Welcome to MC Talk, episode 7, with special guest Bob Hoban and special guest Philip Snow. This is our third time, right? Together.
That's right. It's good to be here again.
Together. And, I think we're just going to talk about trends that we've seen since we chatted last, legislative updates, lawsuits, industry, market, economics, and I think I wanted to start first with just the trends we're seeing. Right now, the biggest trend is probably beverage, right? And what I'm seeing personally is that lots of marijuana companies or individuals or special interests are jumping into the hemp beverage category pretty quickly. Stizzy just launched a beverage. Keef obviously always been in the beverage space, but a lot of people are jumping into the beverage space that might be large MSOs with thousands of employees like Stizzy. What have you seen, Bob, out in the ether? What questions are people asking, and what does this mean for hemp, I guess, in the long run?
Yeah, I think we've heard for years that cannabis beverages, whether they came from marijuana sources or hemp, that was the future. But there was a challenge. There was a problem because you couldn't really sell low dose, meaning 2, 5, even 10 milligram beverages in dispensaries. You needed to have higher milligram content for them to sell. But the trend is towards a sessionable product, a product that can be, you could drink 3 or 4 of them and you didn't just consume 50 milligrams of Delta-9 THC derived from marijuana or otherwise. So couple that with the fact that the spirits, the alcohol industry has seen a decline in sales over years. This wave of the future is happening, but to your point, it's happening with hemp. It's one of the reasons that the Florida legislation, which sought to ban many of these products, was salvaged at the last minute before the veto in terms of just having a milligram limit in there for beverages and finished products. It was because the alcohol industry asserted itself. So we see more and more of that. It makes sense. Low dose, over-the-counter, THC, and other beverages from the derived from the hemp plant that are sold in hockey arenas, basketball arenas, anywhere alcohol is sold. That is the future, and frankly, it's the present, and we see it. I think there's something like 6,700 liquor stores in the country right now that sell beverages with THC in it, and the vast, vast, vast majority of those.
Is that already more points of sale than dispensaries? It's pretty close. How many dispensaries are in the U.S.? It's about that number, I think.
That's a great question. It's but the point is, when you have mainstream distribution, a single-purpose retail outlet like a dispensary.
Next year will be 60,000. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
Within one calendar year, 60,000 points of sale.
And it doesn't stop at beverages, by the way. You have the impulse buy at checkout of a gummy with the same ingredients, maybe the same branding. And then, does that slide into vapes in liquor stores as well? I haven't seen that personally. I'm not saying that they're not in there.
Well, at some point, people don't like to talk about the tolerance. You start to drink, I think it's different than alcohol. You start to drink alcohol and you build a tolerance, but it's not quite like marijuana for most people or hemp or cannabis or Delta-9, whatever you want to call it. Is if I start drinking 4 or 5 Delta-9 beverages a day, eventually I'm going to need a gummy. And I think that's a lot of people haven't thought about that. I've had the discussions just with our brands that we sell to, but the beverage is we're almost like restarting, like we're recatalyzing, a certain group of population that wouldn't go into the dispensary. And at some point when they realize that they like 5 milligrams, they're also going to like 50 later. And I haven't heard anyone really discuss that because the marijuana narrative is all about dispensary. The beverage narrative is all about beverage. And then there's the narrative that is less followed, which is just like, let's just do all of it, right? So I think people don't understand that you got to have the gummy, and then you also have to have the inhalable, and whether it's flower or a disposable for easy use. Sometimes I don't want to crush 12 Delta-9 beverages, right? I'd like to just puff on something or even just take a gummy one time because there's going to be a lot of calories, there's going to be a lot of fake sugar, there's going to be a lot of those things in those beverages too.
Philip, what are the limitations, though, in terms of, hemp-derived Delta-9 products, beverages, from a legal standpoint, not to necessarily stick you in a legal box, but at the end of the day, how do you sell THC beverages in public venues, concerts, ball games, things like that. At the same time, maintaining what you've always known in the rules around alcohol distribution and oversight and stewardship?
It's a great question. I was at a festival this past weekend in South Carolina where they were selling hemp-derived beverages, actually, at the concert that I was at. And I think there are some of the same considerations, age restrictions, making sure that, no different than we would have dram shop acts, people being overserved, over-consuming. You have to be mindful of, how many of those beverages has that person bought over the course of the evening. What are the visible signs of impairment? What are they doing that may or may not be similar to what other people are doing? No different than you would want to stop serving someone that keeps buying the same thing over and over again every 5 minutes with alcohol. I think the same can be said about these hemp-derived D9 beverages or, other derivative beverages and things like that. So just making sure that they're being sold to the proper people under the right circumstances, and that they're not being sold, in significant enough quantities to where that impairment threshold gets exceeded. Everybody metabolizes these products differently. And I think that kind of goes to what Bret was talking about. The metabolism that everybody has changes over time, whether that be as a result of behavior, or whether that be the method of ingestion, whatever it might be. So just understanding, what your consumer is, what your environment is, what are the laws of the given state that you're operating under, as it relates to how many milligrams can you include in one of those beverages. And maybe setting a limit on, no more than 3 or 4 per event, or, something along those lines, just to make sure, because, only recently with the legalization of hemp after the 18 Farm Bill are we starting to see some of the science truly catch up to where does that impairment threshold lie. With alcohol, we've always been able to point to that 0.08 threshold and, cross that line, do not do that. Well, with, cannabis, we haven't seen that yet, but we're only slowly getting there as a result of the legalization of hemp under the 18 Farm Bill. And so I think science needs a little bit of time to catch up, but unfortunately those people out there that might want the 50 milligram beverages are going to disagree with me, but I think it's best to start low, to go slow, and to kind of, crawl before we start walking, let alone running, and, serving these massively overdosed products, at public venues.
And Bret, I was just thinking about this too, that when you talk about beverages, it's really a place from a policy or an action perspective where I think the marijuana sector and the hemp sector
Finally agree on something.
can agree, right?
Yeah.
Because you can carve it out.
Well, there's a reason for that. It's because beverages are 1% of sales, so it's kind of a nothing burger as far as negotiating goes.
Gotcha.
I mean, that's the reason why. And then a lot of people also come from that space too. So the people that have seen the issues with the marijuana model, in my opinion, jumped into beverage because it is low dose. It does seem a little bit more palatable. Even if the Delta 9's made synthetically, it's still Delta 9. It's still what I've been selling the whole time. I feel comfortable with it. So I'm okay with the beverage. It's going to be a huge category. I mean, it's going to be massive. I don't know how big, but it'll be billions, if not tens of billions within the next few years. And it'll be a very profitable sector. And I agree with the 5 or the 10. We contract manufacture at 25, but people love it. I mean, so there is, there's different strokes for different folks, but the reality is it's at least somewhere to where before marijuana and hemp wouldn't even talk. At least it's a bridge. I always thought it was a bridge, and it's seeming to become more and more of a bridge. And I think a lot of people that have moved over from marijuana, circa the stuff that's going on in California, is a lot of people have realized that the terroristic tactics, the monopolistic tactics of, the marijuana lobby, where I can executive order out an entire community of businesses, is just not really acceptable. And I mean, it's nice to see. It's unfortunate to see how it shakes out, but thousands of business owners were not very happy about what happened in California, given Gavin Newsom's executive order, which is just a dirty way to play pool. It's like, okay, we're just going to decide this stuff's illegal today, right? So, I pissed off a lot of marijuana people. I got a lot of calls from people that I knew on the marijuana side that are now, in the middle of that bridge, and they're like, "This is ridiculous." I'm like, "Yeah, this is what we've been fighting for the last 3 years. I mean, this is nothing new for us, and now you guys get what it means." So I think that was a big that was a big day in hemp history. I think we'll look back and say that was Gavin Newsom's executive order was, a big day for people to realize the dirty tactics that are used against the hemp industry. Whether it's beverage, vape, or gummy, it doesn't matter. It's all, technically, legally hemp.
Right. There's no preordained way that this industry is supposed to develop.
Absolutely not.
And somehow, some way,
industry.
some people think there is, and that that this is violating those rules.
My favorite thing to say, and I've said this now 3 times since 2 days. This will be my 3rd time to say it. Is listen, NASA shooting rockets up in space for the last 50 years, and then some billionaire that reads a book on rocket engineering lands one in 10 years. So like revolution is the rocket industry because the NASA was stagnated and didn't innovate anything. Eventually someone else comes along and pushes the envelope and goes, you know what, I can land a rocket again. We don't have to spend $10 billion per space flight. I'm going to land this thing. And then next thing you know, a crane's catching it into the sky or whatever happened the other day. So, I mean, I use that as a good example as the marijuana industry's been around for 12 years. Hemp is now 4, 5, 6, half the amount of time, and look at all the progression between, us selling 40 plus cannabinoids, CBN, CBC, THCV, all these new therapeutic methods. And now we have the beverage category. Beverage category never would have existed without hemp, right? That's true. So, and now we're talking about it being a tens of billions of dollars worth of industry in the next couple of years. I mean, the hemp industry is running away with this thing. No question about it.
And I think that partly goes back to what you had said, Bob. I mean, the beverages were always there to a certain extent, but the beverages that were out there were, more targeted toward, the most bang for your buck. Right. And one thing that you mentioned earlier was kind of the sessionability of this, the ability for people to go out at night, be able to socialize with their friends. More and more people across the country are choosing not to drink alcohol because of the harmful effects that it might have on your body, or quite frankly, the fact that maybe the next morning they want to get up and do yoga, or they want to go hiking. But, life's tough. Sometimes people want, a little bit of a break from it, and you're out with your friends. And so you have 3 or 4, hemp-derived beverages, and you still are able to kind of take the edge off a little bit, but you're not having those same negative repercussions, on your body that you might suffer from the next day. And I think that that's really changed everything. Hemp has kind of brought that to the fold. And I think, as Bret had mentioned, it kind of created that bridge for people to realize, well, wait a minute, it doesn't always have to be about the biggest bang for the buck. It doesn't always have to be, take me to the moon and I'll figure out how to get home.
But the only reason it was the biggest bang in the buck is no one was going to spend $7 on 5 milligrams. Yeah. So that, it was, you could see kind of the progressive innovation of what I had to do as a marijuana company in a dispensary in order to sell a beverage, which was it had to be 100 milligrams essentially. And that's going to be probably more than $7. So it's probably $15. Now you could sell a hemp-derived beverage over state lines, manufacture in Minnesota, ship it all across the Southeast, and it's going to be in 600 gas stations, 600 liquor stores, whatever it is. And guess what? You can sell 5 at $2 or $3, right? It's just a completely... When the sky's the limit, innovations, are able to happen. First it was in the hemp industry. First was Delta 8, then it was the Delta 9 gummy, then it was THCA flower. Now it's Delta 8 beverage. Or Delta 9 beverage. Sorry, we're gonna keep seeing these things happen as long as the regulations continue to be open for innovation, open for American geniusness, if you will. Who would have guessed it'd take us 5 years to figure out to sell 5 milligram Delta 9 beverages in specs or total wines? It did, but now we figured it out.
Well, and I think it's a function of kind of free market economies, right? Having that ability to innovate, that ability to grow, to see, okay, well, maybe it's not this, but maybe let's slightly turn the prism and focus it on something else.
Someone's going to figure it out eventually.
Well, it's you fill the marketplace. Consumers dictate production.
Yeah.
Consumers dictate the development of the industry. And if consumers want alternative products, similar to the Vivamu products or so forth and so on, and on down the line, if they want beverages that contain something that provides an intoxicating effect of some sort, but that's not alcohol for the reasons you described earlier, then that's where things are going, and consumers want this. The question is it more than a cottage purchase? With alcohol, it's ingrained in our culture. There's the the husband, the father that gets home from work every day that has his glass of scotch. There's the mother that has her wine, and the so-called suburban wine moms. This whole thing. The point is that going to happen with cannabis beverages though?
I think so. I think it's and or. So it's either and or it's or. Like so for NA people, non-alcoholics, or people that drink NA beverages, it's going to be or. But for people that do drink, it's going to be and. So the answer is yes, but I'm using that as a prism to say, like, people will still drink. People will always drink. I mean, I'll drink. But maybe I'll come home on a Friday and be like, you know what, I'm going to stay home and drink a couple of beverages or take a gummy or smoke weed, like whatever it is. It's the same. I think nothing changes. Is the big difference in between a Delta-9 beverage and some of the other products is going to be the social aspect, more so than anything. So then it is the cottage product, the lake house product, the, stock it at your parties product, the concerts. I mean, we're already seeing it. I mean, it's already at, I bet if we were at ACL this last weekend, I think it was, there would be Delta-9 beverages there. So I don't know that for a fact, but I'm just going to assume, I mean, ACL is one of the biggest concerts of, festivals or whatever it is, of the year. And I guarantee there's Delta-9 beverages there. So I think it's an and/or product, and it's revolutionary of its kind because it's not an NA. You're not drinking something that does nothing, right? At least it has effects, and that's important. Is some people, if you drink something and you want effects, you want effects. A non-alcoholic Heineken isn't going to do it for you.
Well, and I think that you're starting to see, not that I would ever suggest this outright, but you look at the prevalence of people that. Historically speaking, like a beer league, softball league, or, a bowling league or something like that, where it was just widely understood that people were going to be consuming alcohol while participating in some sort of a sporting event. I think you're starting to see that with beverages that come from the cannabis space. I think that, I'll just use a random and new example in life, but pickleball. I mean, pickleball is, one of the sports that is fastly emerging, the fastest growing sport in the country, I believe. And it's sponsored by a Delta-8 beverage company. So I think that, you're starting to see this become more and more mainstream because of that sociability, because of that sessionability, because of that, I can do this and not get so impaired that I'm, locked into the couch or feeling sluggish or whatever the case is. But I'm also, feeling a little bit different than I used to, and I can still do this. So I think that it's going to continue to grow. And it does kind of provide that unique opportunity for, the marijuana side of the fence and the hemp side of the fence to kind of meet in the middle and say, well, wait a minute, why are we fighting each other? I was on a call earlier today with a reporter from the Miami Herald, and I said, it's interesting that a lot of multi-state marijuana companies purchase hemp-derived products for their ingredient bases. And, I could literally see her mind explode on the Zoom camera because she said, well, wait a minute, why would marijuana companies be buying hemp? I said, well, because it's the same things. They could just get it from hemp. And so I think that narrative is already starting to shift, and people are already starting to realize that bridge that maybe along, not too far ago seemed to bridge too far, is actually being very, very well built, and the sides are actually coming far closer than we ever thought.
Except in California. It goes
California, Missouri, maybe. Couple other places.
No, but that at least bears a mention, right? We were talking earlier, California's governor recently basically picked a winner and said no hemp products, marijuana products from the closed loop dispensary system only. And there was a legal challenge, which I'm not aware of the details of that, but it's my understanding that the injunction phase, the TRO phase, was not successful on behalf of the hemp industry. And so we've seen a little bit of an uptick, at least in the press, and some enforcement, some products seized. But the whole point is a politician, just like in Missouri, picking a winner, saying this industry can sell these things, but not this one. One's federally legal, one's not. One is expressly regulated in the state. One is not presently in most of these states. So what about the merits of a politician, an elected official at least sometimes, but a bureaucrat oftentimes picking one side or the other? That doesn't stand to reason. Not in this country, but that seems to be happening way too often.
I think it's foreshadowing of what is to come, which is when people get desperate and backed into a corner, they start to do things that may be a little bit irrational. So I think the political capital stack of the marijuana industry who's left, they, especially in California, but also very much happened in Missouri, let's go for the jugular, right? Because we don't know how to beat them. In a long-term legislative process, Illinois, Missouri, Florida, we've seen a bunch of losing, right? So let's just go for the jugular, which is an executive order, which we saw in Missouri, which didn't work because it wasn't constitutional. It didn't make the merits to be an emergency. So the Secretary of State shot it down. And, in California, a little bit less luckily given, the political capital stack there is marijuana guys have a lot more juice, right, than hemp guys. Hemp guys have zero juice. So it was very easy for that to go through, although, compared to Missouri. But my opinion is that the marijuana industry is kind of backed in a corner because, again, a lot of these people have left to hemp-derived beverages and then maybe on to more, including gummies potentially. And now we also have institutional players very closely looking at this category, which is, going to be the beer and wine guys. So not only, and then grocery, C-store, et cetera, so forth. Once those guys join Team Hemp, which might just be through Beverage, who knows, it's game over. There's no way that the marijuana lobby can outspend on a political capital basis grocery, C-store, alcohol. It wouldn't be possible.
Once again, fighting to sell products in less outlets.
Yeah, that's it.
Which again doesn't really stand to reason, but I start to see.
Oh, it does. The licenses cost millions of dollars.
Yes. However, the narrative that this is a zero-sum game, that there's not a one market solution, I don't believe that. And I think that narrative has been pushed by, on one end, large MSO-type interests, and on the other end, but on the same side, activists within the marijuana space, people that have fought for years to legalize the plant. They don't want to see derivatives from hemp. It's not what it was intended to be, or so they would say. The MSOs, for example, they prefer the monopoly game, if you will, than looking at a whole plant solution or a single market solution or a merger solution.
I think we see all the MSOs hedging, though, except for one. GTI, Stizzy,
but they
Pure
still
Leaf.
take public policy positions against. They're participating, yes,
For the most
because
part,
they'd
yeah.
be silly not to.
But there's one main MSO that's really holding all the cards. So, I mean, we work with most of these MSOs, and we'll see what happens this session. But I'm not seeing a lot of pushback in DC from anyone besides one. Everyone else seems to be, just let the cards fall. I think that's what the alcohol and wine guys are doing too, right? I think they're going to be like, we'll walk slowly, because what's the worst thing that could happen is we're back to where we were, I think. I think that's why, I think the penetration of the C-store channel is 1-2%. But it could be 100, if all the alcohol guys got on board, for example. And that's when it's game over. As one C-store, all 400,000 C-stores pending legality, so take it down a little bit, but whatever the number is once they all can carry a 5-10 milligram Delta 9 beverage, it's over.
I think that the distinction there is people are starting to realize, though, that they have to participate on both sides outside of, because it's an economic opportunity. And why would you ignore that? I saw a post on LinkedIn this morning by someone who specializes in pre-rolls, claims to have sold
16 million.
Yeah, 16
billion. Maybe.
billion pre-rolled marijuana pre-rolls. So THC from marijuana. And the post was effectively, well, look, we see what's happening. When I see pre-rolls down at the smoke shop that contain THCA flower, I don't look at that as a negative thing for me. I look at that as opportunity. They're not taking anything away from me. They're opening something up for me. They're saying I can take what I sell in this closed loop box and I can sell it everywhere else, to your point.
Yeah, and I'm seeing more and more in that. And I think the next part of the discussion is like the chinks in the armor are becoming very evident. We're starting to hear again, just of the beverage guys, but also now the flower guys are like, you know what, screw this. I don't lobby, right? I'm not involved in public policy. I'm an opportunist, a business owner, a shareholder, whatever it is. Why not? And that's why I think, Stizzy's getting into the beverage space. And I think, that gentleman, I think his name's Nathan, if I remember correctly, that gentleman named Nathan is in this space. But I think people are sick of the propaganda. And there's only a couple of people left holding that propaganda, and they have a lot of money, and they're very influential and powerful, and they're able to spend, tens of millions of dollars to bat it down. But it's not working as well as it should for that many amount of dollars. I mean, we can look at the ballot initiative and the $100 million spent in Florida. And I think the worst poll I've seen is 61%. Philip would probably know that better, but that's after $100 million spent. That's a problem. Are you going to spend $100 million in every major market in order to try to push that monopolistic structure? Why won't you imagine if I spent, or anyone spent, $100 million on a great product and a bunch of marketing and working on the C-store distribution channel? I mean, you'd be overnight the biggest hit success company of 2024, 2025.
A global powerhouse, probably.
I mean, it'd just be incredible. I mean, I really would if you invested that amount of money into our hemp industry, because a lot of people have taken money off the table. A lot of people have had a bad 2024 just because of market consolidation and saturation, which is highly normal in an evolving space. $100 million gets dumped into a Delta 9 beverage and a gummy line and a vape line. If you're good, you do very well in our space. I think you would take over a 10 to 20% market share, which would quadruple whatever what those companies are going to make in Florida, for example, because they'd be able to sell in Florida everywhere.
We had some international business colleagues in town the last couple of days from overseas, and they have a marijuana production. They have an operator's license, and they can produce marijuana and hemp. And the reason they got into the business was because they saw all of the alleged dollars behind this burgeoning, this new marijuana industry. And we've been sort of educating them on the numbers. And look, we can derive these compounds from the hemp plant, these products from the marijuana plant. The outlet of sales globally for a THC from marijuana, the places where you can sell it is very, very limited. Whereas if you derive hemp D9, a CBD isolate that you can later convert, you could sell those products anywhere in the world. And they were skeptical. So then we went and took them to a couple facilities over the last couple of days, folks that have been in the game for a long time, folks that you know well, that you guys work alongside with. And they explained their history, these individuals' history in the marijuana sector and how it led them to be in the production side and to give up all production licensing, a MIP license, marijuana infused product license, to just focus on hemp derivatives. And these guests were their eyes were just so wide open, and they were amazed. How could this possibly be? Why are we talking about this? They didn't understand it. But fundamentally, as you point out, it's the same plant. These are the same compounds. These compounds are standardized. They're utilized in a different variety of products, and one's federally legal, one's not here in the United States, but then that facilitates international trade. Schedule 3 is not going to fix that.
Well, it's not going to fix it at all. And I think that the more education that surrounds kind of the current state of the law here in the United States informs kind of the global policy on that, right? Because I think what America did was led the charge in 2018 with the Farm Bill, and it said, we recognize the value in this. We see a tremendous amount of potential in this, and other people across the world were only looking at the Delta 9 space. They were only looking at the marijuana side of things. And again, hemp reshaped everything. Whether it be us talking about beverages within this country or them, looking in from overseas for potential investments either here or to take back home, you realize that you can do the same thing, across the pond or around the world that people have done in the United States. Well, at that point, it is nothing but an eye-opening moment for people to realize, well, why do I have to be so late to this? We used to joke about this, Bob, that, we wished that hemp would learn from some of the same mistakes that marijuana made, early on. And I think that to a certain extent, Bret, you mentioned this, we've only been around for 6 years on the hemp side of things, but we've learned from the dozens of years, the dozen years of experience in the marijuana space relatively quickly, and that is a very steep learning curve. And now
Very steep.
people from around the world are going to have that benefit of 2020 hindsight and being able to say, well, wait a minute, these guys figured it out with hemp. Why would we even go down the rabbit hole of marijuana? And that could be based on prohibitionist mentalities from countries around the world for a whole host of different reasons. But if you can do it with hemp, then why would you even bother?
Yeah, and that's just the consumption side of things too. I mean, me and Philip had some pretty wild conversations over the past couple of days, but even my eyes were open to a conversation we were having yesterday, which is just remembering what the economy looked like before the prohibition of cannabis, the war on drugs, hemp and everything. Is like, hemp was used in a lot of things. It's, it's going to be, if not, executed, it's going to be $1 trillion industry over the course of 50 years, right? It's going to be, back in those parachutes or whatever, but it's going to be door panels, as we say, and it's going to be transition cops, and it's going to be feed for cattle. I mean, fuel. Yeah, right. So I think the example we use is like the petroleum industry started with gasoline, right? And then next thing you know, it was plastics. Then it was foods, pharmaceuticals, et cetera. And the same thing goes for this industry, and we'll see how it gets there. And it's propped off, the cannabinoids are the gasoline, and then we have everything downstream from there. But it is just like the petroleum industry. I mean, it's a pharmaceutical, it's a nutraceutical, it's a recreational product, and it's also a fuel, and it's a plastic, it's a binder, it's a material of strength, and all these different things. So, it's unfortunate that there's people that are against the consumption side, because that is what's going to prop up this industry. It's also going to be what deschedules. Forget about rescheduling. It's asinine. It is also going to be what deschedules Delta-9. I mean, if I truly believe, depending on what happens in the election, that if I didn't have to spend all this money and other people spend it, money too, on fighting for the hemp survivals, we could focus all that success on descheduling Delta-9. That's going to double my company's size overnight. Why would I not want to do that? So it's not us versus them. It is a dichotomy, if you will. And then all the things will come, the plastics and the fuel and all that stuff will come after. So, unfortunately we do have to fend for our lives. So we have to focus on making sure cannabinoids stay safe. But the next stuff, like the next, in 2030, 2040, 2050, 2060, I mean, it's going to be pretty cool as long as we pull it off. And there's going to be more fights in that, I'm sure, as after cannabinoids. But I'm looking forward to the future of hemp pulling all of our toxins out of our soil, for example, and carbon credits and carbon sequestration. All those things that we got to talk about with some political operatives, if you will, over the past couple of days, because that's something a lot of people can get behind also. It's not just the therapeutic benefits or the recreational benefits, but also what is it going to do for the, specifically for the farm and agricultural land, which is a lot more than any other crop can do.
Yeah, I mean, the future is very bright there. But as I think about it, when you have these state-based mandates and these shutdowns and these picking of the winners like we were talking about, I guess I was just thinking about this, and I meant to bring this up earlier, but it really is important. Does a state like California have the ability to even enforce a ban on hemp products? I mean, consumers are choosing these products. They're going to
a ban through legislation or executive order or
enforcement,
either or, just enforcing in general.
The exact thing that's occurred, but can they enforce it? Not as a technical matter, but as a practical matter.
No.
I mean, California is huge. They haven't been able to shut down, nor has there been any political will to shut down illicit traditional marijuana market.
Market is $75 billion.
I think just let's talk about bandwidth, right? I mean, it's one of the largest, I think, fifth largest economies in the world. There's, millions upon millions of people within the state, and who knows what your neighbor's doing, let alone what the guy down the street is doing. And so I think that from a practical perspective, when it comes down to sheer bandwidth, I don't think they can.
Well, look at New York. I mean, New York, God knows what they sell in those bodegas, let alone hemp products.
And this isn't a come and get us or a I dare you to California State Patrol or their, enforcement agencies. But I just think if you look at it from a practical perspective, you are almost giving them a task that is just going to end up being an exercise in futility, because there's no way that they can possibly police everything. There's no way that they can get everybody and clean up the industry. And yes, an executive order certainly makes headlines and makes it look like the governor's trying to do his part to be responsible. But by no means do I think that that's going to clean up the industry. Realistically, on the marijuana side of things, because there's a number of bad actors there. And as you mentioned, Bob, they haven't been dealt with. But then you have hemp that has been falsely demonized as, this product that is, getting into the hands of youth or causing all of these trips to the emergency room, et cetera, when, it's just patently false. And so I think, the enforceability of this is, it's almost laughable, because I just think it's undoable.
But what it does is it makes Total Wine and Specs pull their stuff from the products, which are the good. Like, those are the people you want in the market, So unfortunately, what it does is it shoves it all the people that might not care. Like, if California shuts down, guess who's not selling to California? MC Nutraceuticals. Like, we're not going to sell Vivimu products in California. So, what does it do is it shuts down the people that are actually going to obey the law, which is problematic.
Well, and, Bobby recently did a piece on that in Forbes. I mean, what products are going to flood in from overseas that are going to fill that void? Because we all know that, you don't have to be Adam Smith to understand the economics of this. The supply might dry up from in-state means, but the demand's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
That demand is going to get met one way or another. And so if that's products coming in from China, if that's products coming in from south of the border, made with who knows what, containing, God knows what, then what are you ultimately doing in the name of public safety? How many more lives are you putting at risk just for the sake of a splashy headline that might help your friends that have been donating and filling your campaign coffers for the last however many years? Ultimately, there might end up being some egg on people's faces as a result of just attention-grabbing headlines.
Well, I think that's what happened in Missouri, and I guess to defend a little bit is that's all these people have heard. So I talked to a nurse today that represents a nursing nonprofit or whatever, in a certain state. And she goes, if I go to my 75 nurses that are on the board or whatever the number was, she goes, they won't know what we're talking about. And I go, yeah, it's all about education. Who's going to get first to the nurses, right? Is it Delta 8 guys or the marijuana guys? And who got to the governor first, whether it's Governor Parsons in Missouri or Governor Newsom? It was the marijuana guys. And listen, Delta 8's bad. And if we would have got there, Delta 8's good first. That's all it is. So it will give you egg. And I guess this is not that a lot of probably elected officials watch this podcast, but, before you rule by edict, you should probably do your research on both sides. And I get that, the interest can be very compelling. And this goes out to everybody in general, is because a lot of people think Delta 8's bad. It's like, yeah, we've sold 20 billion 10 milligram servings of Delta 8 just through raw materials. Yeah, I don't think it's bad. We've also done tox studies and toxicological analysis, to make sure that there is no toxins in it. So there's been a lot of research done, and also Delta 8 was found before Delta 9. So, as far as how old a molecule is, Delta 8's older than Delta 9 as far as research purposes go. So, all these things are important when you educate someone. Is just because you heard it here first doesn't mean it's necessarily true, which I think is one of the problems we have in this day and age, obviously, is the headline or, whatever it is, this guy told me this, is a lot of times it's not really based on fact. And the fact that, 75 nurses or, again, whatever the number was, had never really heard of Delta 8, means that there's probably not a huge issue in that state, I would go to imagine.
Well, I think the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right?
Always does.
Whoever is the loudest or whoever, whether it be, primacy or recency, that's who people pay attention to. So are you the first person to get to the governor in the state, or are you the last person to get to the governor in the state? And I think that's what, they're going to pay attention to, and how loud's the megaphone with which you're using to vocalize your message. And so I think that we've seen that recently. And, this is just another tactic. We've seen all sorts of different tactics deployed by competing interests, whether that be in the form of multi-state marijuana companies, whether that be in the form of, specified cannabis business interest groups, whatever it may be, we're not just dealing with bans in state houses across the country. We're not just dealing with fighting federal policy in DC. We're dealing with executive orders that are almost pay to play. So it's yet another arrow in the quiver that is seemingly, again, hitting the hemp industry in the back as it continues to try to move forward and allow people to realize that, yes, there is this massively important cannabinoid market that hemp has been, fortunate enough to create. But, what are we talking about with carbon credits? What are we talking about with cover crops? What are we talking about with soil remediation? What are we talking about with the fact that studies have been conducted where grain-fed, grass-fed, and hemp-fed animals, the hemp-fed animals are always the best. All of these different segments that hemp can actually prop up local economies, well, it's been falsely demonized, whether it be through corn subsidies or soybean subsidies or, all these different methodologies. Cotton might be the fabric of our lives, but hemp was first. And so these political interest groups have taken a lot of different forms and have shoved hemp out of existence, when at the end of the day, it might serve to be a lot more than just a cannabinoid market. It could help people, regardless of whether their political leanings are toward healthcare, are towards agriculture, are towards the auto industry, are towards fuel, are towards, all of these different things. Hemp can represent all of that, provided it's given the opportunity to have its voice heard.
And the more uses of cannabinoids, the more hemp is grown. You're supporting the farmer. I mean, that's the thing that I think gets lost in all of this. If you begin to shut things down because, this sector should have this versus this sector, you're limiting farmers' opportunity to plant a crop. And in this day and age, they need all the help they can get trying to plant something.
The United States of America needs all the help they can get.
Darn right.
More American growing, more American manufacturing, more American small businesses that can sell the products, whether they're cannabinoids or textiles or concrete. They're all small businesses for the most part at the end of the day. And again, it's innovation. It's American innovation. And if we don't do it, somebody else will. Mm-hmm. And when you're talking about a global economy where it's all about competition from a macro scale, I think it's important that we keep all this manufacturing home and we do all the innovation here, because we are, 5 years ahead. If we stop today, I think we're several years ahead of anyone else with hempcrete, hemp pallets, hemp textiles. But we've just started. Someone can catch up real quick in a 100-year time cycle.
Well, just imagine, as you had mentioned earlier, Bob, you have people coming in from overseas that kind of have their eyes open to realize, wait, hemp can do that? Or, it's not just about one thing, but it can be about all these others. Well, just fill in the name of the country around the world that decides we want to be the global leading supplier in hemp shipping containers or whatever the case may be. And then all of a sudden they start leading the charge in that, and America's left in the wake. And we're wondering, well, wait a minute. We really missed the boat on that one.
Yeah. Any Middle Eastern special interest fund might think, we'll throw $1 billion and plant a bunch of hemp right by the petroleum fields. And next thing you know, they did it again. So, it's that simple.
Well, again, just to wrap up the point on the industrial uses of the plant, that's really a huge future. Planting 10,000, 20,000, 30,000
Hundreds of
hectares
thousands.
in the Middle East for ESG and carbon credits. You're sequestering carbon from the air. To your point, you're bioremediating, you're cleaning the soil, and then you have material that's left over that, if treated properly, and can be R&D'd into reasonably priced packaging, cardboard boxes, and otherwise from the hemp plant. Yes, we can do that, but the technology needs to improve dramatically.
Yeah, for
and,
costs.
and the cost needs to go way, way down.
But if you could separate out the cannabinoids at a low cost and you can shove the rest into a different use, essentially, instead of it being a waste crop, there you go. I don't remember what the story was exactly, but billions of dollars are being spent on carbon sequestration. I think that's what it's called. And when someone realizes that, Mercedes-Benz or wherever it is, maybe a big ag company, like, we can make money and do this at the same time, it's going to be one board vote away from them taking over the whole thing, which is totally fine. And then no one's going to be able to attack it. So it's inevitable that it's going to happen. But, now you see the writing on the wall of the hemp industry.
If you're a large company that operates internationally and or you operate under SEC guidelines in the U.S. or in other places, you have to have ESG, environmental social governance guidelines in place. The easiest way, the cheapest way, and perhaps the most impactful way is for $600 per acre in the United States, where farming costs more than the rest of the world. $600 an acre. You could plant hemp to sequester, meet your environmental needs, sell those carbon credits, and develop the future of hemp packaging and otherwise. That's what we need to talk about. But the only way we're going to get there is if we're using the cannabinoids off the plant and capitalizing on the cash crop element of the marketplace and converting, to your point, converting waste to profit and to catalyze using hemp for all the things we know it can do.
It's exciting.
Well, you heard it here first. Make sure that your investment dollars come to MC Nutraceuticals. Thanks y'all for watching on another episode 7. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.